A teenager in England just solved a math problem that professionals couldn't crack for decades.
No math degree, no research background.
ChatGPT suggested a move that no human mathematician would have thought to try.
And it worked.
The problem he solved, Erdos problem number 1196, had been sitting on the list of open questions for decades, long enough that professional mathematicians had largely stopped trying. And a teenager with ChatGPT just walked up and finished it.
What gets me is the framing of using ChatGPT, because that makes it sound like he Googled the answer. That's not what happened. He was in a back and forth with the model for hours, trying approaches, getting stuck, trying differently. It was a collaboration.
And the solution it landed on wasn't a known technique applied correctly. The mathematicians who reviewed it said it was a move nobody in the field would have thought to make. Not that it was wrong, that it was alien.
Which is the part that changes the assumption the whole field rests on, because math has this long tradition of assuming that insight is the scarce thing. You can grind through calculation, but the leap, the moment where you see the structure differently, that was supposed to be the human part.
And maybe it still is in some sense. A 17-year-old still had to recognize that the answer was worth pursuing, had to ask the right questions. But the shape of the solution came from somewhere outside human mathematical intuition.
There are fields where that distinction doesn't matter much, but mathematics is almost uniquely a discipline built on understanding why something is true, not just that it's true. A proof isn't useful if you can't follow the reasoning.
Which is the real question these mathematicians are sitting with right now. The solution is valid, they checked it, but the path it took doesn't map onto any existing framework in a clean way. So do you publish it? Do you treat it as a result?
And there are thousands of problems like this one. Not the famous unsolved problems, the Riemann hypothesis isn't falling to ChatGPT next Tuesday, but the mid-tier open questions that have been stuck for 30 or 40 years because they needed one non-obvious move that nobody thought to try.
That's the wave nobody quite priced in. Not AI solving the hardest problems in mathematics, but AI quietly clearing the backlog. Decades of stuck problems unstuck.
And the people doing it might not be mathematicians. They might be teenagers in England who just wanted to see what would happen.
The field has always had a complicated relationship with who gets to belong to it. Famously difficult to enter, famously resistant to outsiders. And now, the tool that might be rewriting the rules of access is available to anyone with a browser.
What that does to mathematical culture over the next 20 years is a genuinely open question. Meanwhile, the people trying to break into your accounts aren't solving equations. They found something simpler.
There's a standard piece of advice that's been repeated so many times, it's basically reflex now. Turn on two-factor authentication and you're protected. Phone gets the code, attacker doesn't have it, they're locked out.
That advice just got a lot more complicated.
Researchers have documented a wave of attacks targeting Microsoft accounts, email, calendar, files, the whole thing, where the attacker never asks for your password and two-factor authentication never fires at all.
Because they're not logging in as you, they're getting you to hand them something better.
OAuth is the system that lets apps connect to your account without knowing your password. It's the same mechanism behind sign in with Google or connecting Slack to your calendar. You click a button, a permission screen appears, you approve it, and that app gets a token, a long-lived key that grants access.
And here's why that matters. Your two-factor authentication is watching for logins. A token never triggers that check. From the system's perspective, a trusted app is doing exactly what you authorized it to do. The attacker is just riding along inside that authorization.
The attack works by sending you something that looks like a routine Microsoft verification screen. Familiar branding, normal-looking URL flow. You click through, you've just handed someone a token with full access to your account.
No stolen password, no intercepted authentication code. The account is theirs.
What makes it worse is that these aren't one-off attacks anymore. Phishing kits are pre-built attack packages. Someone builds the fake screen, writes the code, and sells the whole thing so buyers don't need technical skills.
The kits that do this are being sold as services, packaged up, documented, available to people who couldn't build this themselves.
Which means the people running these attacks don't need to understand what they're doing. They're renting capability that someone else built.
And the thing nobody has a clean answer to yet is what Just Enable MFA gets replaced with.
The attack surface just moved from your inbox to your portfolio. And speaking of infrastructure people assumed was settled, Wall Street's plumbing is about to get an unexpected upgrade. Stock trades right now take 2 days to settle. You buy Apple shares on Monday, the actual ownership doesn't transfer until Wednesday. That's not a glitch, that's just how Wall Street was built.
And most people have no idea. The price updates instantly on your phone, but the actual transaction is still grinding through a system built in the 1970s.
The SEC just opened a door. They're creating an exemption, a controlled test where real publicly traded stocks could move on blockchain rails. A blockchain is essentially a shared ledger that updates automatically and instantly across thousands of computers simultaneously, so no single institution controls or can alter it. That's the same underlying infrastructure that powers crypto.
A blockchain is essentially a shared ledger that updates automatically and instantly across thousands of computers at once. There's no middleman confirming the transfer. The transfer just happens.
Which is why settlement could go from 2 days to something closer to 10 seconds.
That sounds like a rounding error until you think about the scale. Trillions of dollars of equities trade every day. The gap between transaction and settlement is where a lot of risk lives. If someone defaults in those 2 days, things get complicated fast.
The exemption is small and tightly scoped. This isn't every broker suddenly trading Apple on a blockchain tomorrow. It's a test environment with guardrails.
But it's the first time the SEC has said, officially, that tokenized stocks can exist, that a share of Tesla can live on the same infrastructure as a crypto token.
Tokenized just means the stock is represented as a digital asset on a blockchain. Same ownership rights, different plumbing.
The interesting pressure this creates is on the clearinghouses, the companies whose entire business model is being the middleman in a 2-day process. The question nobody has answered yet is whether the clearinghouses adapt and find a new role, or whether this is the moment their business model stops making sense.
And the SEC's test is small enough that it might take years to find out.
Japan's ruling party just proposed letting people pay salaries and taxes in stablecoins. Stablecoins being digital currencies pegged to a real currency so their value doesn't swing wildly.
And this isn't a fringe proposal. It passed through the party's official policy process.
The logic is defensive. Foreign payment platforms, Visa, PayPal, whatever comes next, are quietly becoming the infrastructure Japanese people use to move money. And when that happens, the yen stops being the thing that matters.
So they're treating blockchain finance the way you'd treat a power grid. If you don't own it, someone else does.
No country has done this at scale. Japan would be building the template in real time.
Google built an AI system called Co-Scientist, and it independently proposed new drug combinations for leukemia.
Independently, as in no one asked it to look at leukemia specifically.
And when actual scientists tested the combinations in a lab, they worked.
The system isn't scanning research papers and summarizing them. It generates a hypothesis, then argues against itself, revises, and hands the improved version to humans.
Which is a very different thing from a search engine with better autocomplete.
There's a version of this where the bottleneck in drug discovery stops being how fast scientists can read, where the question becomes, how many hypotheses can we actually afford to test?
And that's a much stranger world than the one we were expecting.
The agency responsible for U.S. cybersecurity, the people who publish the official guidelines that every federal department is supposed to follow, accidentally posted their own passwords to a public GitHub folder.
GitHub being a public platform where anyone with an internet connection can browse the contents.
Cloud keys, internal credentials, the works. And the part that's hard to get past, GitHub has a built-in feature specifically designed to catch this before it goes live. Someone turned it off.
The agency is called CISA, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency.
There's something almost instructive about it. Not malicious, not sophisticated, just a person having a bad day with access to things they shouldn't have posted.
The most expensive vulnerabilities often are. We'll be back tomorrow.
A teenager, a chatbot, a token exploit, and the SEC quietly redrawing Wall Street's wiring all in one day.
More than we can get to. See you then.
Singularity Pulse is for informational purposes only. Nothing here is financial, legal, or professional advice.
Views expressed are our own.
I'm Knox. Every Saturday on Pulse Deep Dive, one story told in acts. This season, how AI happened, who really invented the internet, and going back to the moon 53 years later. New chapter every Saturday. Find it wherever you listen.
Origins is a different kind of show. Every Sunday, we investigate the forces that shape the modern world, the geography, the science, the commerce, the decisions made centuries ago that are still playing out today. Find it wherever you listen to this podcast.